Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
So Todd and I are here. This is apparently the rumor is this is the last one.
Not a rumor, it's the truth.
It's the truth. Well, not the last one for good. Like
not the last one for good. But we're gonna take a little break over the summer.
Yeah, because we both kind of have things going on. I'm gonna be in Israel.
Yes, you do.
I've got 10 weddings. I think you actually have 9 or 10.
Yeah, I'm getting close to your number.
Last year I put you in the rearview mirror with like 13.
Yes, you did.
But no, it was crazy, and
we get a little busy during the wedding season.
We do. I'm wrapping up. I think 4 couples in the next week. I'll wrap up all their premarital counseling.
Thanks.
So 7 sessions with those couples, and it's been good, but I still got a few more to go. But your first wedding is this weekend.
Yep. It is.
And mine is May 6th, so
there you go.
Giddy up.
Well, and don't worry, we'll be back. We'll be coming back in the fall, but we
got some great ideas. We're looking forward to some fun conversations, taking those next steps and just what's next, period.
Yep.
And we love it. And so we enjoy doing this. Hopefully you have enjoyed coming along for the ride.
Here we go.
So Todd still wants to hang out with me, so A+. No, but you had the idea of like, we're in this series called Called, but
I do that too.
Called. Titled Called. I think we were informed of saying it that way. Right. I don't know, but and just kind of dealing with this idea of purpose and what kind of was the leading for you to say, okay, I think we need to dive into this?
I think part of it is it's for us as pastors. There's a time where if you've been in this world, like there's a lot of talk about your calling.
Yeah.
And for some, like that becomes very confusing language of like, okay, so did God call me to be doctor, lawyer, teacher, whatever? Mm-hmm. So if I leave that, is my calling jacked up? It's all those kind of, but then there's purpose where it's like, well, wait, we all have purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, it's just kind of like, where does the calling and purpose kind of come together? What does that all look like?
Yeah.
And making sure that hopefully we all recognize God does give each one of us purpose, and what that all looks like and how that plays out is important. And there is a calling component to it.
Yeah.
The things that He wants you to go do, or whatever the roles He wants you to take on.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I wanted to be able to kind of maybe help decipher some of that, but also, how do you know? I think that's the ultimate question I hear. Like, how do you know this is God's purpose for your life?
Yeah. I've been having this conversation with a couple of people recently, just kind of sharing my story. Like I grew up in the church, and Dad was a pastor, Grandpa was a pastor. It sounds familiar to Pastor David's. Just some similarities there. I didn't want to be in ministry, not because I had a fear of public speaking, like David says. Right. I just had zero desire to be in ministry because I thought I want to make money. I don't want to be, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to have to serve and do all these things that I see my mom and dad walking out. And so my goal out of high school was like, let's go work for Nike. I was creative enough, I think, and I get in there and make commercials and do stuff like that. I thought marketing would be great. I had a great high school teacher named Mr. Jansen, and he was kind of like that spur. Chris, you should maybe think about going into business and stuff like that. I think you got some proclivity to that, which is a word I never use, proclivity, but there you go.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Word of the day, everybody.
Proclivity. So this tendency towards business, and I knew, and I had grown up with people going, "You're going to be just like your dad. You're going to be in ministry. It'd be great." And I'm like, no, zero desire, zero. And I got to college and I tried everything. I tried business, hated business classes, which I probably shouldn't have. If I'd really wanted to go to business, but Mom and Dad had said, "Hey, I need you to go to college at Oklahoma Wesleyan," is where I picked. It was between Indiana Wesleyan and Oklahoma, but I saved $3,000. I think that was my ending factor: prayer and saving $3,000 a year. And so hated business. Then the business chair's wife was the elementary ed. So I was like, well, no business. I love kids. Let's do elementary ed. I could be a gym teacher, coach, whatever. And then, man, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't handle it anymore. And so going into my junior year, I was undecided.
Nice.
Nothing says success like an undecided junior. I felt like Pauly Shore almost for a brief moment. Like, I've tried everything. Yeah. And one day we were having a conversation with friends, and one of the girl I was dating, Rachel, who's now my wife, said, I said something. She's like, that's what I want my pastor to say to me if I'm going through a challenging time. Mm-hmm. And it was like a light bulb went off, and God's like, do you get it yet? Mm. Do you get it? And I knew that by that time that God had placed a call in my life to go into ministry. Yeah. And I went back to my room. I'll be honest, I cried for like 2 hours and called Rachel. I said, I think I've been disobedient. I think I need to go into ministry. And she's like, yeah, I kind of figured that was the case. And I went the next day and I met with Dr. Thompson, Mike Thompson, who's actually gone to be with the Lord. And he looked at me and said, yeah, I was just wondering how long it was going to take. And he knew. He's like, we saw it. We saw it in your life. It was a small school, you know. Yeah. And, but for me, that calling was I needed to say yes, because if I didn't say yes, I was going to be disobedient to what God had for me. Yep. And obviously now jumping into ministry, you know, you go, well, what were you going to be? Were you going to be a pastor? Well, no, I wanted to be a youth pastor. And so I spent 12 years doing that. Like, you know, you spent time doing that as well. And I remember my dad writing me a letter when I told them that I was going to go into ministry. And he's like, do not do it. And I was like, wait. And then I read the rest of the letter. Like, he's like, unless you feel like this is the only thing that you're supposed to be doing. And out of that, you know, came this purpose of, for me, the purpose was to love and serve, you know, and show, first of all, kids, teens, who Jesus was. Because I grew up in a small church and never had a youth ministry. Right. So to go from being in college and going, I think I want to be a youth pastor. I don't know what that looks like, but let's figure it out. Here we go. But no, I had a calling in my life. And I tell that to people, like, don't go into ministry if you don't have a call to be in ministry.
Well, and I think even in your story, you do a good job of, I think purpose will always be, well, we're called to show people who Jesus is.
Absolutely.
Like, it's the, take the Great Commission. We all have that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once we've become a Christian, it is go and make disciples. And so whatever that looks like, you're going, okay, that is my purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
And all of us as Christians, we have that purpose, and that will include layers to it: learning how to love, learning how to trust, learning how to give grace, learning how to do my job, do this with my family, do this with whatever the community I am that I'm in. And then you've got, like, that's my purpose. Now, calling is a little bit interesting because calling can be in some of those specific areas.
Yeah, it can.
Calling can be, hey, I want you to go do this job. Yeah. That's what you and I experienced, like a calling to go, I need to go be a pastor.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, similar story in the sense of I wanted to go be a professional baseball player. That did not work out at all. And I started realizing that probably junior year in high school.
But I would say, like, I mean, listen, I was a catcher in high school and up until like junior high. And I loved catching, and I thought I was all right at it. But you took it to another level of saying, man, and if you've never watched Todd play a little baseball, a little softball, Todd's good in the box, like in the hot box of shortstop, third base. Todd can hold his own.
Yeah, and I loved it. I thought, and I remember my parents told me, he's like, that's what you told us you wanted to do. So we tried to up it. So I got to do competitive baseball, kind of upper echelon. But I just realized, you know, there comes a point where like, there's a lot of other guys who are really good and better than me. Yeah. And so at some point, like, I was like, okay, what is this other thing? Yeah. But I still had, the purpose was there of like, okay, I need to go do ministry in some way. Yeah. And so I remember thinking like, maybe I have a calling to be a minister. I felt that as a junior in high school, but then I went and spoke to the youth group thinking maybe I have this spiritual gift that I'm not aware of preaching. And it was miserable. I failed like so badly. So then I questioned it. Like, I must have heard God wrong. Like, and so I did took business classes. Nope, I hated it. Took an intro music theory. Thought it'd be like, I'll do something in music. Nope, that was terrible. It bored me to tears. And so God was like, hey, take intro to pastoral ministries class. And I was like, man, God, I feel like we've had this conversation. I failed miserably. I don't want to fail again at this. but he's like, I need you to take it.
Yeah.
And
well, there is an obedience to a calling. I mean,
Yep.
that is so vital. And, all of us, I mean, I was modeled like loving and serving people.
Yep.
So that was easy for me to step into, right? Like, and had I not had that to fall back on, but that's just the way and everybody leads differently, right? Like you have people that grow up with pastors that are strong communicators and you have to learn and you have to work at it.
Right.
But again, going back to that, like I knew I was called, so I needed to be patient to figure this out.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to jump and say, well, I'm called. Let's figure, I must, no, hold on.
Yeah. And so for us, what's interesting about our calling is like, when we're called to be a pastor, it's kind of like some of the reason your dad wrote, like, do not do this.
Yes.
Unless, because some of the mindset within being a pastor and becoming an ordained minister is like, you are doing this for life.
Yeah.
It's not,
absolutely.
It's not like other jobs where it's just like, you know what, I might bow out, 10 years in.
Yep.
Some people do that. I get that. But it is more of this, like, I think I'm supposed to do this for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
And so that's the calling where it's more of this was job and it affects purpose.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, like, my purpose is still to go and make disciples and love others. And I get to do that while being a pastor.
Yep.
Now, the other callings that I've since people have is like, you can get called to an area.
Yeah.
I think of like Jonah. I have a calling to go to Nineveh.
Yes.
Tried to run from it,
Yeah.
but that's a calling. And so
Fair
some
enough.
of us go like, hey, I'm called to this community. I feel like I'm supposed to serve here. I'm supposed to do things here. That may mean I've got this job, but that's maybe part of it, but that wasn't a calling necessarily, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. Some of it may be a calling to be like, I'm supposed to raise a family.
Yeah.
Like I've heard some of that before. And so some of these callings is more of like God telling you, this is what I want you to do. And then, so it's a role that you take on. I get to be in this community. I get to raise a family, or I get to work in this setting, whatever it may be. But the purpose you get to play out in all those callings. So if that helps kind of separate the two in my brain, because sometimes they can really like get mixed and jumbled up.
Yeah. Well, and what do you do when your calling, doesn't pan out like you think?
Right.
And, like for example, my sister from 12 was called to be a missionary in Japan, you know, and she as of right now, she did that for 20 years. And now she stepped off the mission field for a little bit right now and is determining what God has. Maybe it means she'll go back to Japan. Right. I don't know what that looks like, but sometimes I think people take it hard. Well, I was called to do that. Now I'm not called to do that. So I got to figure something else out. Hold on, and then you get in that purpose conversation, and it is like okay. So if that's not it, fall back to purpose of how do I show people Jesus? How do I love others? How do I, share my life with people and walk out what Jesus calls every believer to do. Yep. And
you see it sometimes in scripture, like people have callings, but it doesn't mean the calling is going to play out exactly how you want it to. Like you and I, like you've experienced this probably more than I have, but you get called to a certain church and you're like, okay, that's where I'm supposed to be. But then that time ends.
Yep.
Or that place, you're like,
okay. And sometimes you have zero
call on that.
Zero role in that, but
and so that's the part is like, sometimes when it comes to calling, you're like, God, I'm confused because I thought you called me here. Yeah. But now I'm getting kicked out of here, or I'm getting fired, or I'm getting like, this is not going the way I thought. And so God goes, wait, hold on, go back to your purpose. Yep. Because even if you and I tomorrow, like for some odd reason, all churches shut down, never happened. But there was only a few churches, and there just wasn't enough pastor jobs. Like, okay, that calling's changed. Yeah. But I still have to do my purpose.
Yep, absolutely.
And so that's the part that helped me kind of decipher this. Is like, yes, we're all called by God, but it's going to be different things. But our purpose,
absolutely,
is like God's calling us to go live for me.
Yep.
And pick up your cross. Those things, that's purpose language. Calling is going to get maybe into the specifics. Yeah. On some levels.
No, it is. And I love that. He was thinking about Pastor David's message this week, like the information and application.
Yes. Great. Yes.
Oh, I love that, because I think that we want to gather a lot of information and we think if we have all the information, but sometimes calling and purpose has a lot to do with faith and just walking out, even if we don't know, specifically what we're supposed to do, and be faithful to what we do know.
Correct.
But then taking what we do know and applying it, like, is it Mark Batterson that said it? I can't remember, a pastor in DC area. We have more information than we're willing to even walk out.
Yeah.
Right. We have so much information. And if we would just begin to walk out what we already know, I think for some reason, feel like we have to get to this certain place, and then we can fulfill our purpose if we get to this place informationally wise, or if I have enough experiences, or if I'm put in the right position, then I can walk out what you're talking about, Todd, or I can really feel competent when God says, no, listen, follow me. Like the disciples only knew fishing. Yep. When Jesus called them to come follow. They only knew tax collecting when they said, come follow me.
Right.
It starts with a willingness to listen and to be obedient, I think, first and foremost.
And I would add, and this is the part I had learned, another component to it is don't let your calling become an idol.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because there's been times where I've let the pastor be like, okay, that's everything.
Yeah.
And God's like, no. You've got other roles that are important too. And if that were to take him from you tomorrow, do you still go after your purpose?
Yeah. Yep.
Because I always look at it as like your identity is like, I tell myself, but I also tell other people, like, you were Todd before you got married. You were Todd before you had kids. You were Todd before you got a pastor job. That's who God cares about.
Yeah.
And he's teaching Todd how to have purpose, but he's going to give you these roles that shape and mold and help that purpose have even greater depth to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
if you start talking like that, I don't know if
third person
myself. Like, you walk into the office tomorrow, like, Todd is busy finding his purpose today.
Well, Jimmy.
How are you talking in the third person? Well, Jimmy thinks you're great.
Jimmy thinks you're great. And so that's the part that has just been for me of like, don't let the calling get. Yes, it's awesome that God gave you that calling, whether it's to a place or whether it's to be a mom or dad or to be do a certain job. Those are great, but hold those with open hands.
Well, no, I agree with that.
But purpose, you go, nope, I'm latching on to this because this is about me learning what God wants for my life, and it's less about what I'm doing and who I'm becoming. It's about the transformation that's happening.
Yeah, well, Darren, you know Darren at Early Wine, and like we're created on purpose for a purpose, know, and I love that phraseology. But I want to go back to what you said, something else. Like, what if your calling changes? What if something, tomorrow, and I'm holding on, and maybe I'm being disobedient to what God has called me to do? Is like He's calling me to a different place or a different situation, and those are tough because if you come wrapped up and identified, and you're not willing to. You were obedient enough in this first one, but why not now? I think that goes to ongoing conversation and relationship with Christ and saying, God, whatever you have for me, I want to be obedient in that.
Well, I mean, a prime example, I was like, even me coming out here was somewhat of a calling conversation.
Sure, absolutely.
Because I had a job opportunity at my home church in Kansas or the job out here in Rapid City. And I was pretty locked in because of comfort in what I knew. And I had just spent 2-3 years being an intern at this church. I thought, all right, because I just, like, over the summers, I just would work there, that kind of stuff. And they offered, I was like, this makes sense. Like, I know the people, I know, like, and God was like, I think you're supposed to go here. And God helped a lot of people shape that because I needed to be like, kind of looked in the face and be like, I don't think you're supposed to go there. And I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. And so that was a big faith moment for me. But if I would have locked on to Kansas, I'm not saying it would have went bad, but I think God would have been like, okay, you missed out on this other piece of the calling that I wanted you to be in. And so that's the part that's always crazy to me is like, I think those calling moments are, I think, almost fuel for the purpose to become that much stronger to where it is faith moments. It is obedient moments. It is like, okay, I'm calling you to do this. Will you do it?
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, me becoming a pastor was that. Like, I was so insecure about becoming a pastor because like, I didn't grow up in a pastor's home. I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, I am so scared. Like,
sure.
Like, I'm like, I got lucky of being able to watch guys like you, but also like David, of just being like, okay, teach me, like show me how to be a pastor. And now 15 years later, I'm like, this has been an incredible journey. And the calling has shaped more of like me becoming a pastor has shaped more of my purpose.
Yeah.
And letting me like, nope, this is who I am. This is who God made me.
Well, those passions that God grows in you are so great, and they do, because you could be like locked in. Well, I was a youth pastor, but now discipleship and seeing people take next bold steps, or being a dad or whatever. I mean, and those seasons lend themselves to those passions that grow. I resonate with that. But I mean, I grew up in Iowa, Minnesota my whole life. I was a Hawkeye. I thought I'd just be in the Iowa, Minnesota district, and then time came for a job, and the only job that I had available was in Oregon.
Yeah.
And, tell your future in-laws that you're going to take their daughter 1,600 miles away.
I know.
And they're like, I don't think so, Tim. You know?
Where are you going again?
Yeah. And being obedient.
Oregon, Minnesota?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I haven't heard of it. Where's that?
Close, so close. Right next to Mitchell. Morgan Mitchell. Anyway. But the funny part was, I mean, I knew I was called to go into ministry, and I was called to do this, but I wasn't prepared to be like a dad figure at the age I was, 25, to a bunch of junior high girls. That was huge. I mean, I still, in my mind, I can remember all those girls and those guys that were apart, but like Katie and Julie and Becky and oh man, and Amy, those individuals that were part of that youth group, that I was like, that was fun season for us to minister. But like, just going back, they were a part of that purpose of showing, like John and Alex and Skippy, all those. Okay, so his name is Matt, but I call him Skippy. I'm the only Skippy. We called him Run for Fun for a while. It was pretty fun. But just all those kids that were so amazing to be able to be a part of their lives. And it really formed like, you know what, I'm in this because I love people. And I want people to feel loved and valued. Right. And I want to show them who Jesus is. And it was crazy how that calling just ushered in that purpose, that calling, like, okay, are you willing to be obedient? David shares about that, because we can go to a calling. I'm called to be a pastor. Right. I know what to do. And you're like, oh, crap, I don't know anything to do. And God's like, your purpose, is it your purpose or is it my purpose? There you go. And are you willing to because we've known a lot of guys that have served in their own purpose and it's come crashing down. Yeah. The calling becomes bigger. Yeah. Then I get to do this, which is my purpose. Yeah. Like, no. Yeah. God's already defined the purpose. Yep. Calling is just shaping it and telling you where it's going to go, how it's going to maybe play out. And you got to listen. It's going to change. And God's going to say, I would like you to do this now. I'd like you to do that now. And because I'm not a 47-year-old youth pastor anymore. Thank you. Yeah. But I also know when it comes to calling and purpose, one of the things that you will deal with, and you referenced Darren Earlywine, like he's got a book called The Death of a Dream. Yeah. And so that's sometimes hard where you feel like, okay, God and I are on the same page. This is the direction I feel like God's leading my life, or I got a calling here. It will fulfill the purpose that him and I have talked through of this is what my life will be about. And then it doesn't play out at all. Even for me, I mean, we both referenced dreams that would have been our dreams. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Working for Nike, being a baseball player, that we kind of had to be like, hey, I got to let that die. Yep. And it's not easy. No, it wasn't. You talk about a crying moment. I had my own of just because I was like, I don't know what it is, because I know baseball's not in anymore, but this does not seem like the right option being a pastor. And I'm mad that God, you're like, why are you calling me into this? I don't want to do this. And I fought it as long as I could. And God's fine. I mean, I remember audibly hearing his voice. Are you done yet? Yep. And I hated hearing that. Because mine was, are you ready to get, like, it was almost like pouting in the corner and God going like, you ready to get up and let's start doing this? Like, and, and I'll be honest, it wasn't like, like people talk about, this is a little side note. I didn't just become like a great student either. I wasn't like, like people think that I found my purpose and I became an A student. You're like, no, that was still not me. No. Sorry to shatter somebody's, idea of what that was like, but I still struggle. But I mean, I had an idea about what that looked like, but man, surrendering. I mean, it all comes down to this surrendering, this willingness to be obedient to God. Yep. So whether it's a purpose that puts before you. Some of us struggle with just purpose of talking to somebody about God, and that's what God calls every believer to do. But this idea of being called and a calling,
Yeah.
it may take you from, I have a friend that was an accountant and now he's a pastor, and, calling you out of a profession into something great.
Yep.
And you're like, yeah, that sounds like work. Yeah, but God's going to sustain you in that work. And if he called you, man, I want you to be willing to take a bold move. But, how do you test that? God's word, talking to people that you trust.
Yep.
A lot of time in prayer. Maybe it means, this is a spiritual term, but we've been talking about lately, putting a fleece out like Gideon did. He put a fleece out to test God and say, God, if this is really you, I want to know. And I know it sounds really super biblical, but it just really is like, God, I want to test and approve that what you're calling me to is exactly what I'm sensing and what I'm hearing from other people speak into my life.
Yeah. It's all that is a journey you go on, but I think it's an awesome thing to go on, because God's taking your identity of being a follower of Jesus, being his child, and going, okay, that's your purpose. So I want you to follow me. So here's the things that will kind of push that, test that, but in a good way.
Yep.
I think if you also get a chance to just help you kind of navigate this purpose and calling conversation, like go read the story of Joseph.
Yep.
I find, like,
I'm in it right now. I'm reading it right now.
I appreciate that story so much more. I used to think like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like his brothers were really mean. Like that seems a little,
we hate you a lot.
But now it's like God gave him an early calling in his life.
Yep.
That he would be a leader.
Yep.
Giving him dreams that this would be the case.
Yeah.
And it did not go how he wanted to at all, out of his control.
Yeah. Well, and it was funny. I shared this same verse with my guys at Bible study this morning. Joseph went to prison in Potiphar's house after, getting wrongly accused
of sexual assault.
Sexual assault by Potiphar's wife, who thought he was a hottie, went after him. But it said,
not a light accusation,
no, not at all.
In our world today, we're like, oh,
that's a little dangerous. But it says right there, after he went to jail, it wasn't long until the warden turned everything in the jail over to him. So his calling was put on hold for a little bit, let's just say. But his purpose was to be obedient to God no matter the circumstance.
And I would say the whole point, God was giving Joseph's purpose to be like, I want you to help others. I want you
and something's got to form in you.
And form in you because he was going to be a leader someday that was going to navigate multiple nations through a famine.
Yeah.
And I go, that is not easy to lead at all. People starving and looking at you going, I need food. But also being the guy where there was years of blessing and plenty, and he's going, we got to save. You can't have that much.
And so regardless of the circumstance, Joseph was faithful regardless of whatever was going on.
God was going, I want your character and your purpose to be locked in so that you can accomplish the calling. It started all the way back when he was a young man. And now he's kind of living through this like, I don't understand it. I don't get it. It's not the dream I had.
Yeah.
But then you also see like when he first was, and this is the part that always stood out more now to me, when he first is telling his brothers the dream, he's going, okay, like we'll do this. And then Pharaoh comes to him and goes, hey, I have this dream. He goes, I can't interpret it, but God can.
Which he could have got shot on the spot.
I know,
right?
he could have. And so you see the change there of just like there's a humility and just this like, no, God's the one leading this.
Yep.
That's my purpose. And I will fulfill a calling I feel like he's put on my life. But then to see it come to fruition where his brothers, but it's one of those where you're like, oh, I didn't know it would mean they're dying of hunger.
Yep.
There's no food there. They've got to come to me. And so it's just a fascinating story to see how. And I go, that is, on some levels, that would be all of our stories.
Yep.
We're not going to become second in command to all this, but what we're going to experience is this. I feel like God's calling me to do this, and he's going to take you on this journey of locking in your purpose and locking in who you are so you can experience this calling, and it's going to have multiple layers to it. There's going to be so many pieces to it, and this calling is just going to be like, wow, God, thank you for letting me be a part of this, whether it's being in this community, raising this family, doing this job, whatever. But you just go, that has less to do with what you've been doing and shaping me and and creating the purpose in me that I'm like, now this is clear.
Yeah,
regardless of where the calling takes me.
Let that sink in. You know, the story of Joseph, wrongly accused of sexual assault, was a part of the purpose.
Right.
Pharaoh, who cared nothing about God until a dream was revealed to him, was a part of the purpose.
Right.
Was a part of Joseph's ultimate purpose of being in the place where he would acquire the title to where his brothers would have to bow down to him because Pharaoh thought he was God. Mm-hmm. And so if you were associated with that meant you were on equal playing field, and you better choose wisely when you're in his presence.
Yeah, because Joseph would have probably let that get to his head a little bit.
By the way, I've got a really nice coat. I don't know if you noticed that. Anyway.
But even the brothers selling him to slavery, like some of these things God allows so that you can go through and experience the full calling that God has and the purpose down deep that he's going, you need to be ready to take on this calling. So good stuff.
Don't buck against those moments that come that are difficult, man. Press into God. Press into God.
And I would say pain does not cancel your purpose.
Yep. No.
Sometimes pain
is a part of the purpose.
Part of it.
Man, such good stuff. Listen, it's kind of a bittersweet moment. Like, I know. We're stepping out for just a little bit of summertime, and we'll be back a little bit later.
Yes, but it will all be good, and we'll be ready to come back, ready to go in the fall.
Rock and roll. Have a great summer. Maybe we'll pop in from time to time and throw a little special event at you.
Some surprises.
Yes. Super excited. But no, hey, it's been great, man. Appreciate you a ton.
Loved it.
All right. See you next time.